Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Implement Waste Management Strategies to Achieve Zero Waste. My name is Victoria Knowles, and I look after the Strategy, Engagement and Supply Chain groups here at 2 Degrees. I'm delighted to welcome the presenters today. Mark Shaler, Director of APE, Marcus Dills, Managing Director at Returnity Partners, Tom Campbell-White, Commercial Manager at DS Smith, Charlie Brown, Sustainability Manager of UK and Ireland at IKEA. After the presentations, we'll have a few minutes at the end where the presenters will answer your questions. Before we start, I'd just like to remind you all that you can submit questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A box just in the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Just type in your question and press send, and we'll wait until the end to answer as many as we can. Otherwise, if you have any technical difficulties during the presentation, just use the chat box on the right-hand side, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So without further delay, I'd like to hand over to Mark, who will get us started on today's presentation.
Hi everybody. So I need to just find my slides. There we go. Okay, so my name's Mark Shaler, and I feel like I've been working in the circular economy forever. We just didn't call it that. We called it waste minimisation, or we called it common sense. And I love the fact that it's now got a proper title and some impetus, because that's pushed it from the kind of backwards into the main kind of business agenda. The first thing, we're talking about waste today. It's not waste, it's a resource. So this is resource management in a circular economy, and it's something that we've been talking about for a long time, and is now coming to fruition. But why bother? This is a question I've been answering for a long time, and I still get asked it. Why are we interested in this? Why bother? Now, the first thing is resources. We can debate how many years of resources we've got left. The 2007 report in the New Scientist caused a lot of controversy. Either way, people agreeing or disagreeing with it. One thing's for certain, we're running out of cheap resources. And it's not just cheap resources, it's who owns those resources. So geopolitics are increasingly important here, as are the ethics of production, and as are the ethics of supply and transparency of supply. It's very difficult to know where your materials come from in a global market. For example, Rwanda does not produce any tantalum for capacitors, and yet it manages to sell it. They haven't got any reserves, but it manages to sell it. So there's a whole kind of sort of shadowy part to this, and we don't know where materials are coming from. Secondly, we need to be much, much more efficient, not just in terms of the amount of materials that we use, but in terms of the volume of the products and the size of the products. All of that kind of common sense stuff about better design stands true today. And then there's the ethics of the things that we're using. So whether we're looking at factories collapsing in Bangladesh, or whether we're looking at the role of the militia in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. By the way, if your country has to use the words democratic and republic in the title, it's neither of those two things. And there's a whole lot of ethical concerns that sit around here as well. And one of the big things that interests me is skills. You know, we're 5 years away from losing key manufacturing skills forever into retirement in this country. Textiles are probably first, but also general manufacturing close on that. So we're going to lose skills, and I see this as a way of trying to reintroduce some of those key skills into the economy. And then following on from that, reshoring, can we bring manufacturing back? That would seem to make enormous sense to me. So they're the key reasons, and this isn't hippie stuff. This is business critical stuff. It's taking the issues from the woods into the boardroom. There isn't a major player that I'm working with at the moment. I'm working with a number of blue chip companies, every single one talking about the circular economy. So that's a success. Now, you will all know there's 4 building blocks to the circular economy. I'm not going to dwell on 3 of them. I'm going to talk mainly about product design. But they are product design, reverse networks, business models, and then broader enabling conditions. Product design, I think design is the single most powerful tool that there is out there in terms of environmental management and reduction. I think it's a superpower, and I just think we either use it well or we use it badly. Reverse networks, trying to understand where materials end up and where they're needed, trying to make that thing work, the logistics works, crucial. Not my thing for today, but a massive issue. And then business models. I think probably 60% of all the work I do at the moment is on innovation in business models, and I think it's absolutely fascinating. This is one of the key barriers to circularity, along with consumer understanding. And then the broader enabling conditions, so how we can use legislation, taxation policy rewards and how we can kind of stimulate societal expectations. We talk about a free market. It's not free. It's manipulated in many, many ways by other bodies, by governments and larger organisations. And so understanding how we can manipulate that for good is really smart. Right, people can't hear me. I will move closer to the mic. Is that better? Yes, better. Brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to talk about product design. I've been designing products and I've been looking at product design for about 22, 23 years. I'm not a designer. I'm an environmental consultant that's learned how to do design because I got frustrated with the answers given when I tried to change things. And the answers were always, yeah, the thing is the product's designed like that. So I had to learn. I had to pick up things as we go along. Now, the product design brief is the key thing here. It reflects the business models, it reflects the policy, and it reflects the user needs. It's the easiest thing to change, but let's be honest, it's the hardest thing to change because the person that's changing the design brief or the person that's in charge of the design brief is often the accountant. It isn't often the user. And so we need to write better briefs. And as I said, designers can make bad go away. It's just that no one's really asked them. Designers need to challenge the brief much more strongly. Now, back in the day, back in the 80s and 90s, we talked about design for X or eco-design or sustainable design. And that's all of these things, disassembly, longevity, modularity, recyclability, the whole lot. And all of those things still remain today, but we've changed our language. We have a language of circularity now. So we talked traditionally about take, make, use and dispose in terms of models, and that kind of way of looking at resources is dead. Not dead because of hippie environmental reasons, dead because it makes no business sense. Some of my biggest clients are major blue chip manufacturers, and their single biggest challenge is getting hold of raw materials. So this is real for everybody. So I do a lot of work with the Great Recovery, and they've developed, as has everybody else, kind of four main different models in terms of design. And I'll talk through those really quickly. My preferred model is designed for long life, to keep things cycling longer. So I love stuff that lasts a long time. So I'll pay more because it's more expensive to pay less. Cheap is not always the most profitable way of looking at things. So I like stuff that lasts a long time. So how do we keep the consumer and the product engaged in a relationship for longer? We make it better. It's really, really simple. So design for long life is one of the best strategies in my mind, and it actually fires up some of the other strategies as well. So design for service. So taking your product as a service, having a relationship with a brand that goes on and on and on and on. So that could be around leasing, I guess. It could be around subscribing to services. That's also really good in terms of understanding how a brand can earn more money from selling less, because realistically, that's our challenge. How do we make more or the same money by selling less stuff? And design for service is one possible option there. And then we've got design for remanufacture. So we buy it or we lease it, we use it. When it's finished, it goes back, it gets remanufactured. And there's some brilliant models from Xerox or from Caterpillar. There's loads of really great models that exist and that work financially, that wash their faces. So design for remanufacture for some products is the right strategy for them. And then design for full material recovery. Now, this kind of fits into all of them. So it doesn't matter whether you're leasing, whether you've got a service, whether you've got something that lasts a long time. It doesn't matter what your relationship is in terms of buying the stuff. At the end of its life, being able to get all of the raw materials back out and reprocess them is crucial. And we've made some really, really sort of smart moves here in terms of improving the amount of recovery that we can do. The one criticism I would have is in the broader enabling conditions, something like end-of-life vehicles or the packaging regs, that all their targets are weight-based. And I'd really like to see us recycling value rather than recycling volume. A much better example would be the Japanese recycling laws, which value the rare earths and the special materials that we can get out. So material recovery is crucial, but let's make sure it's the valuable things rather than just kilograms per person. So to my mind, in terms of design, the key issue is not the skill of the designer, it's the demands that are placed on them. We need to understand what we're trying to do, what a good job looks like, and I don't think we're there yet. I think there's a lot of nice words, and we've not nailed the action thing yet. In reality, it's going to vary from one product, one company, one business plan to another, and it's also going to reflect the wider enabling conditions. These are more and more important, certainly more important than we thought straight away. So if we have a narrow focus, removing waste, we risk dealing with wider problems and wider opportunities, and we miss failing to deal with those wider problems and opportunities. So we need to be broad rather than just looking at waste. We need to understand the full cycle. And so I think design is just one part of the solution. Arguably, I'd say it's the simplest part. I'd say designers are smart and can do what you want them to do. I think we need to broaden ourselves out, and waste reduction is only one aim of circularity, and arguably it's the simplest aim as well. So the big challenge is redesigning whole systems, redesigning consumption. That's massive. How do we make more money and make more people happier by selling them less stuff? Massive, massive challenges, but actually I'm quite excited by all that stuff. So thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of the session. I'm going to pass over now to Marcus Sills. Marcus, are you ready?
Thank you, Mark. I am. And I will follow up your few as Mark mentioned, there are quite a number of depictions of a circular economy. And I think the purpose of our discussion today is very much to focus on what is actually leaking out at the bottom, where material streams go into energy recovery and landfill, and squaring that off against the different design, the bricks that Mark mentioned already. The interesting part is that if you look into the building blocks, they typically are designed to attack some points of problems that we do see in the linear world. And I will talk about sort of business models and the skill building in reverse today. And I think a lot of the issues are linked with the fact that there is very, very low incentives to bring products at end of use back into the hands of those that actually can valorize them. And there's very limited control of manufacturers and retailer after post-sales usage. And that's sort of a major barrier where a lot of waste management companies and municipal agencies fill the gap of actually collecting these materials and bring them back into the society. The second part is then on skills in the reverse cycle. Typically, if you don't achieve scale, it becomes very, very costly to actually do the collection, the sorting, etc. But if you actually try to achieve significant scale, the incremental cost comes down and makes it very, very viable. And that typically also then leads to higher quality stuff. In order to make that practical, I would like to take that discussion of a very sort of ubiquitously available product, polymere. So the young gentleman that you see there is picking out straws. So why is he picking out straws? He's picking out straws because they can represent a value, and there's basically a treatment process at the back end that allows to unlock the value. And by sharing sort of the joint proceeds, that earns a living for the people involved. Now, if you actually now move that from this case example up to sort of the larger economy, you see that basically achieving scale becomes the increasingly important part at end of use to valorize material streams that otherwise would have deemed waste. And separation, identification, and having sort of the right quality recovery and revalorization technologies are then part of the back end. Now, if you look at what this means for today's numbers, sort of in polymers alone, we basically leak about 4 billion of material value every single year. If that would be financial terms, you would be basically celebrating a Black Friday every day. And polymers are, for that reason, particularly interesting because they're so broadly used in different streams, from plastic bags into durable products like printers, T-shirts, bottles, etc. So they're really a common denominator in our modern manufacturing for durables. But they're also ones which basically are deemed to be sort of very inexpensive, so typically recovery rates are quite low. Now, if you actually want to improve that, there's 3 steps to it. First of all, you need to identify the value. Secondly, you need to find mechanisms to unlock it. And then thirdly, be able to share these value generated along the value chain. And in polymer, there's a good example of that. That's basically the PET bottle. So the PET bottle today achieves about a 30% reuse rate, and it already saves 8.5 billion of the 400 billion opportunity that we saw earlier. And that basically is triggered around two loops. First of all, the bottles themselves have been designed to cater with changes in design to handle different type of drinks. So in the beginning, they couldn't hold carbonated drinks, they couldn't hold drinks that need to be filled because the material wasn't susceptible to it. But now, having sort of made design changes to the structure of the bottle, all of these drinks can be packaged. And that's why sort of simple idea has gained mainstream and is now allowing to be shared across different users. And that obviously drives up scale and lowers the cost. That was then getting in such an attractive market that Tomras and others actually produced reverse vending machines stepped onto the plate and created another sort of way of industrializing this treatment and therefore further decreasing costs. So if you actually find the right business model, you can reverse the race to the bottom into a race to value. And then if you have a large enough volume stream which you can easily identify, then basically they also become susceptible for recycling. So that's basically the idea of identifying the value, being able to unlock it by putting the right mechanisms in place. And in that case, it has been used the market mechanism to actually find mechanisms to share the joint and created value. And there's no reason why we would not think to believe that this would be possible for all different type of products. Potentially, we could regulate out some which will be sort of hard to capture otherwise, like plastic films, where the European Commission is today already very aggressively. But for the others, one could imagine to create sort of a common thread of material streams, creating incentives for collection at the waste management side, and then putting this really back into large-scale revalorization mechanisms. And that helps to drive down further costs and therefore makes recycling and reuse much more accurate. So this is a case example for polymers. This can be shown for many other products that we use, metals, paper. Also on the biological nutrient side, there are quite a number of examples. So the key is really to unlock the opportunity by spotting and identifying the value, the right business model for harvesting, putting up the right mechanism in the reverse distribution where waste management companies can play a major role, and then finding ways to share incentives along the chain. And I think with that, I would like to hand over to Tom. Thank you.
Hi. Thanks, Marcus. That was great. Hopefully, in my presentation now, I'll be able to give a bit more information on how we can make the zero waste journey a reality. There's a lot of talk about the circular economy today, and rightly so, but to put it in the context of a zero waste strategy, it's easier for me to talk you through the process of embedding the waste hierarchy to focus on high quality recycling and a move away from a linear model towards a society in which we properly value our resources. For us, for me, this means promoting source segregated material wherever possible, because closing the loop is more realistic when high quality source segregated materials are presented for remanufacturing. As we've already heard, we have to redefine the way in which we talk about waste, because it's not a waste, it's maybe a resource, or sometimes it might just be a product. Concentrating on the upper parts of the waste hierarchy will naturally help you to achieve bottom line improvements as well as environmental improvements, but really focusing on material quality will allow you to look at closing the loop on material flow. Not all closed loops are perpetual and may be better described as open loops, but manufacturing with secondary materials follows circular economy principles, and I think that should be applauded. But it's important that we focus on the touch points that we can control to ensure that the material quality is really kept very high up on the agenda, whether it's thinking about manufacturers considering recyclability for products as well as packaging, and that goes back to the design issue that Mark talked about. whether it's distribution centres and logistics providers keeping material integrity intact by not mixing materials that have been segregated at source, whether it's retailers providing clear recycling messages and processes for staff and customers, or whether it's consumers being given efficient and effective recycling systems at home that provide the maximum opportunity for high quality materials, as well as being able to recycle on the go, or recycling companies managing material as a resource and not a waste. So let's have a look at some examples. Reducing waste is the most important part of the hierarchy. This is a photo that I took of some waste from a retailer. A large chunk of their waste was made up of polystyrene fish boxes, but not enough was produced at any one site to provide an efficient recycling service. Some of my colleagues in the packaging division have looked to remanufacture a fish box from corrugated cardboard, which has the same thermal properties as polystyrene. It's easily recycled, and it significantly reduces the waste arisings at site level. When looking at waste reduction, have you done a full estate audit of your waste streams, and do you understand what makes up the main constituent parts of your waste? Other things to think about: do you understand your supply chain so that you can push upstream on redesigning packaging or products? Moving down the hierarchy, looking at reuse. Reuse is a real key part of the circular economy, and we've already heard about the importance of changing our business models. We've taken the issue of the single-use white pallet and redesigned it in a heavy-duty corrugated pallet. This pallet works on a reducing rental, so each time it's used, it's costing you less, but it's tracked right round your supply cycle. Then after being used up to 7 times, it can be recycled. So it's a really good example of redesigning for reuse. Reuse is a key strategy for furniture retailers. Businesses like Furniture Village and IKEA, which we'll hear about later, have collaborated with the third sector to effectively manage products which have been viewed as waste traditionally, but can still be used. But I don't want to steal Charlie's thunder, so I won't say any more about that. But questions that you can ask yourself: can packaging within your supply chain be reused? Do you have a joined-up approach between your packaging procurement colleagues and those responsible for your waste? Because a joined-up approach means that you'll spot opportunities for reuse much more easily. Coming down the hierarchy, looking at recycling, I want to give you some good examples of businesses that have focused on closing loops for recycling. At M&S, when they were looking at their Plan A, they wanted to remove collections from store level, but they didn't control their own logistics network entirely. Food waste, obviously, was seen as a challenging material to effectively backhaul to central hubs. By getting a heavy-duty flat pack box aligned with a plastic bag, Marks & Spencer were able to utilise their own resource, being backdoor cardboard material, to provide an innovative solution. The boxes were delivered to stores, filled with food waste, sealed, and then returned to their distribution centres. The food waste was recycled through anaerobic digestion to create electricity and fertiliser, and the cardboard could then be recycled through their normal process. At McDonald's, they wanted to provide a closed loop for their milk bottles, but creating a loop involved management of many parts of the supply cycle. Their distribution partner returns the bottles to central locations. They're bulked and then sent to a UK processor. The recycled content is then sent to Nampak Plastics, who blow bottles for Arla Foods, who fill the bottles for McDonald's, and then that loop can continue. The last example that I'll give you on closed-loop recycling shows effective routes for retail-grade plastics. Traditionally, particularly store-quality plastics, the material hasn't been a high enough quality for UK processing. So maybe it's been sent for export or not been able to be handled efficiently. We've worked with some retailers on sorting film to provide UK processors with a material which is of a high enough quality to send to UK processors to make into things like bin bags, which can then be sold to consumers by the retailer. It's a really great example of a circular flow of material, although not necessarily a closed loop. The key point about all of these examples is that the process can fall down if quality isn't focused on. With Marks and Spencer, if the quality of the food waste isn't managed across the estate, then the material isn't suitable for anaerobic digestion. The digesters can't use the material. With the McDonald's material, if it's returned in sacks or clear bags and then baled in the bags, then the material isn't suitable for processing in the UK because the managers of the sites won't be able to effectively remove the material from those bags. And with the retail grade plastic, it can only be recycled in the UK if it's sorted to a high enough quality with no contamination from food waste or non-LDPE plastics. So if you want to create closed loops, it's really important that you put quality at the front of the agenda. Coming down the hierarchy to recovery, I see energy from waste as playing a really key role in handling the materials that can't be recycled. Within my industry, in the recycling industry, there's a concern, I'd say, that energy from waste is replacing landfill without enough focus being put on pushing waste up the hierarchy. We know that paper and plastic grades are being pushed into energy from waste because grades are being mixed together, and recycling facilities maybe can't be run efficiently or effectively to pull those material streams through. But harvesting energy from end-of-waste materials is an effective way of handling truly residual materials. As an example, at DS Smith Paper Mills, we're actively utilising efficient energy from waste plants to provide heat and power for our paper mills. Any plastic rejects, for example, we're able to put through energy from waste plants, and that's an example of where responsible use of energy from waste can divert material from landfill. So some ideas for you to take away on keys to success. Can we change our thinking? Waste should be thought of as a resource, not as waste. We need to get attitudinal buy-in from staff and consumers. Re-evaluating business models and collection structures is really key to our ability to handle these materials properly. We need to treat resources with respect. That means, in my mind, moving to source segregation wherever possible. And lastly, lead by example. We need to change the parts of the cycle that we can control. That's the end of my presentation, so I'd like to pass over to Charlie.
Charlie, are you available to present?
Yeah, I am, but the presentation hasn't come up. I'm still on the Tom's previous presentation.
Okay, I can see your presentation.
It's made me the presenter, but I can't see my slides.
Oh, that's interesting. I can see them. That's really weird.
See, I'm moving. I can move.
Try that. Can you see it now?
No, I'm still on Tom's last slide. Keys for success.
Charlie, there's a rider on top. It says IKEA slides. Can you activate that?
All right. Okay. Cool. I'm sorry. I'm obviously technologically incompetent around this stuff, so apologies for that, everybody. Okay.
No worries.
I'm Charlie. I'm the Sustainability Manager for IKEA UK and Ireland. And it's been very interesting hearing my previous panellists speaking around the circular economy, because as a retailer working in the UK and obviously as a global organisation, the circular economy now is becoming front of mind and is actually a reality for us, and how do we work with it? And the specifics of the strategy are quite clear, and the knowledge, people like Ellen MacArthur and like I said, my previous panelists, we've got the ideas, but actually to put it into reality is something a little bit different. So my presentation is really about one case study on one part of our work on working from a linear supply chain to a circular economy. So first of all, which is key, and there's already been a few questions come up about this, is around company culture. And we come from southern Sweden, and actually our work around in this area has always been coming from the frugal use of resources. So don't waste materials, and flat packing itself as a concept got more to the market with a more efficient transport system, and this was being done before sustainability was probably a buzzword. The company itself, just a bit of scale for you, we've got 303 stores in 26 countries, over 135,000 co-workers, 50% of our managers are female compared to 30% of the global workforce. We get 684 million customers visiting our stores. They spend nearly 30 billion euros, and we have 1.3 billion visitors to the website. This whole concept of circular economy and working on the environmental field isn't new. It isn't something that we've just started to adapt as a current trend. We've been working on this as a Scandinavian company since the 1990s, developing policies, founding organisations, and then moving through the 2000s and to 2010. Developing new strategies and developing new campaigns. And I suppose on that, the biggest one for me, and somebody asked the question, how do we make this relevant within a business, is when the global organisation appointed Steve Howard to sit on the global board with the top 6 people making the big decisions. When it comes as a top-down process, that's when things start to change. And IKEA, as we've already talked about, in regard to the whole idea of a circular or sustainable business model, is accepting that climate change is a reality. We are getting more consumers, and we need, on the back of resource scarcity and our impact, to have some kind of transformational change to our business model and to make it sustainable. And I was talking to some people from IKEA of Sweden recently, and they're talking now about maybe 10 or 15 years ago, the price of a product, maybe 20% of the price would be the raw materials. We're now looking at it being 80% of the purchase price of a product will be the raw materials. So these things that we're currently not able to get back into the supply chain to manufacture are very valuable. It's a cornerstone, and it needs to be a cornerstone of a business if you're serious about it. So this is our ongoing global strategy, and of course it's the UK strategy. And one of the cornerstones of that plan is sustainability. And so drilling down, that's the kind of the macro level, drilling down into what, and this is just one of the actions that we're doing. So there are, many strands to this strategy, but one of the ones which is key to us is actually closing the loop on home furnishings. And the first thing that came from this is actually our customers requiring it. Our customers asking us for maybe 10 years or more, I want to buy a sofa or a mattress from you, but what do I do with my old one? I live in a 3rd floor flat in central London, I don't have a car, I use public transport, how do I get rid of my old mattress? So we've offered a service now, and in a nutshell the service is that the customer decides to offer a collection, to take a collection of their old furniture. So they want to buy something and they want to take their old one taken away. They purchase the service because nothing comes for free. So with transparent pricing, you pay for what you get. They get a bag and they pay £20 for the service. Now that is still undercutting all of our competitors. They go to our home delivery service. The system is based on delivery to the customer. That's how the model works out, and they get briefed by the home delivery staff on what we accept or not accept. The goods are delivered to the customer's house. The old goods are assessed, so we don't take rubbish back. If it's been sitting in somebody's garden for 3 weeks, we won't take rubbish. It's not a waste disposal service, but we will collect it. The goods are taken back to the HDS centre, and then they're consolidated, and then they're collected by a charity. We work with the umbrella organisation of the Furniture Reuse Network, and we have a service level agreement with local charities. The goods are either repaired or refurbished or sold in the charity warehouse, and then £15 of the £20 charge actually goes to cover the cost of disposal if the charity can't reuse it, and we demand that they actually use a recycling service. So we don't make any money from the service. And then we have an invoicing and statistic exchange between IKEA and the charity. So the background of that was our competitors were offering it. So Dreams here were offering a service to clear old mattresses, and we looked at what local governments were doing, what our market offer was, and what the customers actually want. We did actually research a central recycling facility, spending a couple of £1 million on a central recycling facility, but the reverse logistics of that were extremely challenging. We can get goods one way on the trucks very efficiently, but actually getting the stuff back is a different proposition. We funded a test with one local charity in Birmingham. It was a disassembly and reuse test. We wanted to see if we could actually stimulate a small local economy where they would refurbish and employ people to refurbish and disassemble. And then we tested that, and it was centrally funded from our service office in London. We provided them with some equipment. So on the right hand side, the picture at the bottom, you can see we provided them with baling equipment. Again, the vision for this was that if they had to disassemble, that they could actually bale the material and turn it into a transportable resource that we could actually get back into our supply chain. So after the test, we decided to launch it. It was launched in 2012 with the FRN, the Furniture Reuse Network. The first step was we put leaflets with links to charities, so it was an education at point of sale. Next, we put in website links to the charities direct, and then the third step was actually to offer the take back. What was quite interesting about this is a couple of screenshots of the web pages. The marketeers were a little bit upset actually, because actually this little icon, this e-spot that's here, actually was the most popular click-through on the whole web page. And everything that they've done nice about beds and textiles and all the rest of it, actually people were very interested in this. It generated 35,000 website hits in a month, which was considered significant. Challenges? Well, it was buy-in from sales. It's seen as a sustainability initiative rather than a sales initiative. We see it as a sales campaign because it adds value. It gives the customer something that they need, but it has sustainability benefits. Harmonising 5 silos. It's like herding cats to get sales, services. Our recovery teams, they're the people who deal with damages in the store. Our home delivery, who are semi-external, and our charity, to try and get all of those working together in 19 stores across the UK and Ireland has proved to be a challenge. There's also not actually completely firmed up as a reality, but it's quite a strong suspicion that this black economy that's already been in existence for a number of years with home delivery, where somebody delivers a sofa and then the household resident says, would you get rid of my old item for me, and here's £10. So we believe we kind of may have been intruding on a sub-economy that was already in place. We've found that sofas are difficult to disassemble, so that's a challenge for the charities themselves, and also that there is a low level of appliance returns, and we think a lot of people actually find a scrap value or a reuse value somewhere else. It's also a challenge to work with 19 charities and 19 separate contacts. And also we seem to be, I've been told in the past that there's cutting edge technology and bleeding edge technology, and we seem to be at the front end of this. There aren't really any national laws or initiatives as such. In France there's already an obligation in regard to take back on home furnishings. We see it coming, but it's actually nothing to really support us here at the moment. And where we are today, we've relaunched the campaign. There's we've learnt a lot in the last couple of years, new routines and in place, and audit systems. we've now got clear charity and store processes, and we were probably feeling our way a little bit with what would work. We have clear service level agreements within the stores and also with our partners. We've changed it from we want your old furniture to actually a recycling service. We felt it was actually more, it gave more clarity to actually the service that we were offering. We actually now have a manager in charge of services, and so we'll have somebody that actually owns it in our service office organisation. And we've decided that we're going to try and work in closer partnership with a direct competitor, but at an operational level, we're working with John Lewis Partnership, who are offering a similar service, to actually align our service agreements. So we actually talk to the charities with the same service level agreements, with the same contracts, so that we actually can kind of have a harmony between our working operations. And we're now seeing the first sales goals being set by stores of selling, a certain set amount of the services per year, and we're getting clear KPIs, and our sales goals are beginning to come to a reality also. I'm afraid 10 minutes doesn't do the whole story justice, but if you are interested in any of the other projects that we're involved in, please visit www.ikea.com, and if there's any questions, I can take those. So that was it for me. I should clarify, this top left-hand picture isn't a child labour photograph. This is one of the eco tours. Somebody did challenge me on that, so it's. But anyway, thanks for your time, everybody.
Good to know, Charlie. Thanks very much for all your presentations. It's been really great. So we've got some really good questions coming in. So I will start firing away. So this one's from Mark. One attendee asks, or says, I'm struggling to convince engineers and design engineers in particular to start thinking differently, systematically. Do you have any advice on what works?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, absolutely. I've typed in an answer to that. It's a real challenge when design engineers are faced with just reduced costs. That's pretty much their brief. Now, no one made a better thing by reducing the cost of the old thing. Sometimes you've got to take away that the cost challenge and say, how do we do it better? Now, I've saved my clients over 100 million pounds through better design. If this costs money, you're doing it wrong. Okay? It should always reduce money. But more than that, it should increase sales. And more than that, it should protect brand or increase brand value. And more than that, it should reduce risk. So this is crucial to sort of business commerciality. If we look at it as a cost, then we're thinking with our old brains. It's like reptilian thinking. That's how we thought about sustainability in the 1970s and 80s. I can show you hundreds of examples where this is business critical and business positive.
Thanks, Mark. I see, Charlie, you've also written an answer for this one. Do you want to just elaborate what you wrote in the box below? Yeah,
I think it's key that senior management in the business are engaged, and I think a lot of companies are starting to recognise it. Tom mentioned Marks and Spencers as being a good example. I think there's a business threat here. If we want to be in business in 20 years, we need to adapt our business models, and that's very clear. And I think Mark was saying, the numbers do stack up. I mean, we've moved in about 7 years from spending £1 million on waste to an actual surplus, and investing in baling equipment and sending cardboard and plastics for reprocessing. With DS Smith, we actually look at a cost neutral and cost positive operation, but we're even looking now of moving into shipping cardboard, plastics and other materials back to the continent, because we buy board to package our materials at say €100, but we're only getting maybe 20 or 30 euros a ton for the cardboard itself, maybe a little bit more. But so actually making this part of our business and then turning that cardboard and things into new products. So we sent 600 tons of board last year to Sweden, and they manufactured it into Billy backboards and Billy shelves for the Billy bookcase range.
Great, thank you. And one from Marcus. How is this circularity model being sold to existing industry, and how can we change and shift this?
Yeah, I think it boils down to identifying that there is a positive business case. I think sort of the numerous examples brought forward on the discussion just now shows that this is not confined to sort of certain niche products as many people believe, but it's really important sort of to start showing how a circular setup could look like, running some quick back-of-the-envelope numbers that show what the value creation is, and then getting basically sufficient enough people around the table that Charlie called herding the cats that can work together to bridge the gap. I think companies typically have a very, very good understanding that they need to employ hundreds of very well-trained people in the upstream supply chain to manufacture products across global supply chains, but nobody is putting the same effort yet against the reverse side, which is basically the dark side of the moon. And you only can entice them to put sort of the flashlight behind the moon by showing that there is some real value. But I think sort of the track record on case examples, sort of the numbers that stack up in total, I think has led to the fact that by now I think more than 60% of the Fortune 500 corporate leaders have put circularity as one of their top priorities for the next years to understand. So I think that what we are seeing now is really the turning point of what Mark said, a long coming trend. But basically now there's a clear vision around business value and economics that will make that sort of a very, very much mainstream activity for many businesses to come.
Brilliant, thank you. One for Tom. So one attendee says, there is currently a big industry based on waste to energy using unrecyclables from the bottom of the waste hierarchy. Do you feel that the drive to zero waste will significantly reduce the feedstock to this sector? And at what point in waste recycling, expressed as a percentage of total waste, does it no longer make sense to recover materials but to burn them for energy?
It's a good question, and has got quite a lot of information in it. I'll do my best. Energy from waste is a really vital part of the zero waste journey. I think the concern, as I said in the presentation, is that different materials, when they go through a mechanical sorting process, handle in different ways. So, for example, if you have mixed materials going through a recycling facility, then potentially paper grades may react in a similar way to plastic films. When paper grades are wet, then they may get stuck to other materials, and so there's a potential that we could lose valuable cardboard, paper, plastic grades through pushing too much material too quickly through mechanical sorting processes. So then if we go on to trying to think about how we classify end of waste, because I think that is an important part of this process. When we think about energy from waste and who's classifying end of waste, if end of waste criteria is being classified by the people who remanufacture materials into something else, i.e. the reprocessors, then they'll be sure that material is actually end of waste. Whereas if end of waste is defined by people who are recycling or putting through a recycling facility, then potentially valuable resources will still be classified as waste when they are actually not a waste, they are a recycling material. So I guess in answer to the question, will material be taken away from energy from waste facilities? I kind of hope so, a little bit, because we need to make sure that material is pushed up the hierarchy. And if stuff is going into energy from waste just because we don't have the facilities or the drive or the passion or the ambition to get those materials either recycled or stopping them from being produced in the first place, then we're in danger of really missing out on this kind of circular economy, the infrastructure that we need to build. So yes, we probably will lose some feedstock, but the the infrastructure needs to be invested in to make sure that material can be properly recycled. I hope that kind of answered the question. I know, sorry, it's a bit waffly.
I had something there as well, actually, Mark. I think it's more worrying than that. I think that the energy from waste plants that we've got are unbelievably hungry. You need to feed them, otherwise they're inefficient and they cost too much money to run. And B, we've got such long-term contracts, 20, 30-year contracts, to feed these energy from waste plants. I think energy from waste planning applications going through in the UK at the moment exceeds energy from waste supplies. And I think if we're not careful, the energy from waste solution, for want of another word, will threaten to derail other circular economy strategies. It's one of the biggest concerns I've got. There's some brilliant work being done by Eunomia looking at the availability and capacity within this sector, and it's really eye-opening.
Thanks both for your answers. One for Charlie. So one attendee says that many of the products IKEA sells are not durable. How do you reconcile circularity for those fast cycle materials as their life cycle impacts and embodied energy aren't maximised effectively?
I'd probably challenge the point that that they're not long life. I'd say that there are certain items. If I look at the guarantees that are on our products, kitchens, for instance, kitchen units and stuff. The example there that we put a 25-year guarantee on those. We put 5 years on appliances, and off the top of my head, 5 years on appliances, and I think it's 10 years on taps and 20 years on mattresses. So I think we put a commitment to the quality of the products, and I think, but going back to my discussion, is that no matter what the length of life of the product is, and some things, maybe like textiles and that do wear out quicker, we need to get them back. And I think that's the recognition, whether it's a long life product or a short life product, it's getting those raw materials back. And some of it's in the supply chain of design, but then exactly as Mark was saying, actually burning products which are perfectly recyclable, just to recover at the bottom end of the waste hierarchy, the calorific value, doesn't really make sense.
Definitely. And I see, Mark, you've answered that question as well. Do you want to elaborate on what you said from a design perspective?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's really tricky when I've just said already that I love design for longevity. But in reality, some products will be better suited to a short life. And fast fashion is one of those products. Whether you think fast fashion should exist and is morally acceptable is another thing. The problem is it does exist. And so how do we design that type of product so we can get them back and get them back into polymer format and get the materials back out? The same may be true for some homeware. Now, I've had 3 IKEA kitchens, each one in a different house. I've not worn through them, Charlie. That would make me over 75. But they last for ages. But I've also had lots of very cheap pans that I had as a student, and they don't last very well because they're an entry-level product. That's fine. So let's make sure there's a system in place to bring those things back, or to recover those things, or to segregate those things so that when you put them in your recycling box, the bin operative isn't going to have a dicky fit at what he or she is seeing. So let's work on the fact that we're always going to have some short life products, and let's come up with a design that suits them. And there's loads of solutions there. I mean, I do this every day in, day out. There's a number of ways we can look at disassembly, active disassembly, trying to close the loop on products that have relatively low value and that are alive for a relatively short time.
I think just to come back on that as well, I mean, to be honest with you, you're talking to the converted with me. I don't know whether I'm an environmentalist masquerading as a retailer or a retailer masquerading as an environmentalist sometimes. And, all I'd say on that is that it's going to take a wider societal discussion on exactly those kind of things. And I think there is a change in young people in regard to one-use fashion. You only have to look at all of the retro shops and stuff like that, and charity shops. People are choosing actually to buy, to reuse and reuse old products. But I think there's this the linear economy based on almost like a wartime economy of mass manufacture and consumption. I remember doing a presentation here at the office and to the marketing team about sustainability and the new campaign for IKEA. And this isn't a new campaign for IKEA, but only come here if you need to. And that's almost the philosophy of, when we sell a sofa, actually, don't sell the sofa, sell an extra cover, so the customer can actually change the look and feel and clean it. So it's the design, the recyclability, and the reuse of products, which is going to be key for any business that wants to be in business in 20 years.
Thanks for those answers. We've got another question here that asks about the theme of biomimicry and how much this is evident in the journey to zero waste. So, Marcus, do you want to have a go at answering that one?
Yeah, with pleasure. I think this is one of the techniques where basically nature has shown that with sort of very limited material palettes, sort of we only used 4 or 5 polymers in nature, but it's all sitting in the design of the structure, and you achieve very fascinating results in terms of durability on the one hand and flexibility on the other. You have colors that you can project by having sort of light reflected. I think this is an absolute amazing source of innovation, which will lead to simplifying material palettes, therefore create scale that allow to create more attractive return opportunities. And it will also lead to reducing the amount of material needed in the first place. Sort of, if you think about sort of a bio-based 3D printing, where you apply biomimicry structural elements to produce basically everything you need with very little feedstock, that would be basically eliminating a lot of the process, but also a lot of the end-of-use waste issues that we're discussing today. So I think it's absolutely core element, and there's great literature available on that.
Thanks, Marcus. Here's a question for you, Tom. How do you see the importance of sustainability training in whole circular economy approach? Training your clients, your customers, your employees, etc.
Well, it kind of goes to the very heart of the issue, because proper, effective training, literature, understanding, buy-in, it's what we see day in, day out, because if we want to introduce projects for our customers to increase recycling rates, to focus on quality, to any projects really, we are pretty much completely reliant on the people who actually handle those resources, the people who are responsible for collecting those materials. So without proper training and understanding, and probably more importantly than that, real buy-in, none of this is going to happen. I think people need to feel passionately about these issues, and I know that children in schools are learning about things like recycling, recyclability, sustainability, resources, things like that at a very early age. So hopefully we'll see a generational change of a whole society starting to take these issues more seriously and understanding the value of materials. But it is going to take time, so I think it will take people like us who are interested enough to join a webinar or go to conferences to talk about these things, to start making these kind of changes that will need to be generational changes. So yeah, training and buy-in and passion, these type of things are key to the success of all of the things that we've talked about today.
That was a great answer. And just to finish off, because we're just about to run out of time, can you see a time when zero waste will be a reality? I'll throw that out to any of the presenters.
I'll start on that. I think zero waste is I guess at the starting point. It's a philosophy, and I think that zero waste means focusing on quality. It means focusing on recyclability. It's about design. It's about infrastructure. Zero waste. We'll probably never get to a situation where we live in a society where there is absolutely no such thing as waste. But I do imagine that we'll live in a society that looks very different to how we live now.
My sense is that we will don't hear about the term waste for much longer. Sort of the pressure on resources is so high that this will be regarded as secondary resources. And for that reason, there will be only very, very limited fractions which you can eliminate in the design process pretty quickly. That will not find sort of a secondary opportunity. So I think it's inevitable, and it's usually profitable. So I'm sure it will come fairly quickly.
And for me, I think the definition of waste is changing. What was considered waste 5 years ago is not waste. As taxation goes up on things like landfill, waste is now being, treatment opportunities are now being seen to be cost effective, and so things that would be considered as waste and destined to energy recovery or landfill are now becoming a raw material. So I think that will change. So I think it will just be that the amount of waste which will get smaller and smaller.
And I'd agree with that as well. I think the way we look at these things will change, so that we look at material flows in a completely different way. So we'll talk about zero waste with a wry smile, and look back historically at how we used to view resources. So I think that not only will zero waste become a reality, but I think that term in the end will become history.
Some really great thoughts, thank you. And I think that's all we've got time for today. But I'd like to thank all the presenters and everyone who's joined us for this webinar. The recording will be archived on 2 Degrees, and I'll send you all the link when it's live. For any questions we didn't get time to answer, you can post your discussions on the 2 Degrees platform. I hope you found the session informative and enjoyable, and I will also make sure that you access DS Smith's white paper, 1 Step from Zero Waste. Our next webinar is on sustainable timber in the supply chain, which will take place next Thursday, the 27th of November. More details of this can be found on 2 Degrees. So thank you very much, and I hope to speak to you all again soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.